I was born in the Bay Area in '88 and stayed there for a good 12 to 13 years, my family being part of the great Bay Area Sacramento migration of 2000 and beyond. I haven't been to the Bay since, but our last house that we lived in was a two-story built in the 60s, if I remember correctly. I have a huge Greek or Persian family, and we're all extremely close to one another. Growing up, my mother told me that I had an imaginary friend. I was apparently too young to remember any of it, but now, after years of mind-altering consumptions, God forbid I remember what I had for dinner yesterday. But I do remember a few incidences that have haunted me to this day, and I'll never forget them. But people may call bullcrap, but I've always been sensitive to things around me. I could feel and pick up on people's energies and moods, even energies of something when I was by myself. I was fearful and hesitant to tell anyone in my family of the countless occurrences that had befallen upon me, being that 3 members in my family were diagnosed with schizophrenia and manic depression. I obviously did not want to attract any kind of attention to be associated with that. But those occurrences are for another time and perhaps another place. So, our plan was to move into the place for about a year while our house in Sacramento was being built. It was a great achievement for our family to finally have a new house of our own that we could finally call home. But the house that we were staying in, I can't remember the address or the street name, but I remember the major cross street, became one of the scariest and most unnerving times in my entire life. The layout wasn't exactly a comfortable living situation, being that there were 6 of us, including my grandmother, living in a 4-bedroom house, and me being the youngest was obligated to sleep in a literal windowless storage room that was connected to my older brother's room on the 2nd floor. It was always a hot, musty, sickening feeling upon entering it, and at the beginning it was very quiet, and the only sensitivity I felt was when I had to sleep in that closet, as I called it. It just never felt right to me. It was always off. A couple of months in, too, there was a bit of anxiety throughout the house, almost as if something had awoken and was breathing down your neck. I made it a point to never go downstairs alone at night for some reason. I eventually noticed small happenings too, like lights turning on or off by themselves. When no one was in the room, mind you. Coffee cups being moved from one counter to another. Cold chills every once in a while. Doors being opened when we had closed them, etc. And then the knocks and the scratching came. My parents were very hard workers, making sure that they had enough to provide for our family, so they were rarely home. My older sister was at the age of teenage angst and rebelled on the streets. My brother was extremely into skateboarding and would hit the pavement with his neighborhood cronies almost daily after school, so my grandmother and I were the only ones home until my parents returned from work. I would always sit in my closet, watching television or playing my PlayStation, and I would hear 3 consecutive methodical knocks or very long dragged-out scratching noises that sounded like they were coming above me in the attic, and most graciously, the entrance to the attic was located in my closet. No, they were definitely not animals too, because we eventually had someone come out to investigate after my constant complaining. I, being as young and sensitive as I was, refused to go into the attic and see for myself, and the environment just sent a sharp, painful chill down my spine. Another time I was home alone, father, sister, brother, all out doing what they do, mother and grandmother at a doctor's appointment or something of that nature, shopping perhaps, I don't know. But I was on my way downstairs to the kitchen, and in that house, the stairs going up lead to an enormous open space with an opening to see down to the front family room. For some reason, too, I'd always look over the ledge to the 1st floor to see if someone was there. Don't ask me why, it was just something that I did. And this time, I caught a glimpse of someone rushing into the kitchen from the stairs, whom, or whatever it was, moved incredibly fast, too. I called out, "Mum?" But there was nothing. "Mama?" Nothing again. I worked up the courage to go and confront whatever it was, and I began the descent to the 2nd floor as quietly as possible. When I was on the 3rd or 4th step from the bottom, I heard a dish breaking in the kitchen. The loud crash startled me, obviously, and I looked to the 2nd floor, my mind filled with the indecision of whether I should continue, and I did. My heart was beating so hard and so fast that you could literally see my chest thumping to each strained pump. But alas, I was in the doorway to the kitchen ever so carefully. I don't know what I expected to see. Working up the nerve, I finally turned the corner into the kitchen, but when I did, nothing was there, except a broken mug that had been left out on the kitchen island by either my mother or father. But I remember distinctly feeling cold, almost as if a breeze had gone through me. I began to pick up the broken pieces of the mug when I heard a loud slam of a nearby door closing, and I booked it, ran as fast as I could up the stairs to the safety of my windowless closet. But I can confirm that there was definitely no one home. After that experience, I was plagued by similar occurrences such as that, but I won't get into all of that because that would take forever to explain. Now, it was about a couple of months before our big and final move to our house in Sacramento. My parents had gone up to Sacramento, dealing with the necessary things involved in buying a house. My grandmother was visiting family in Canada at the time, so my sister was in charge of babysitting my brother and I. And lo and behold, she went out to a friend's party, spending the night, and left my brother and I home alone, thinking that my brother was totally capable of taking care of me. An hour had gone by, and I remember being extremely tired after a long day of video games and adolescent fun. I turned in, lying down on my bed in the closet and slowly drifting off to sleep. And I had awoken about an hour later to use the bathroom and walk through my brother's room. Was also sound asleep, softly snoring, and I remember my closet was connected to this room. I relieved myself, though, and returned to my bed. My TV had been on, so I decided to turn it off, and thus I was now in a pitch-black room with no light, no windows, and, I remind you, no way out. I also had trouble sleeping when I was younger, so my method was to close my eyes and imagine the things that I was going to do the next day. A few minutes went by when I felt just this chill and anxiety and the uneasiness again, only this time it was extremely thick. And then I heard slow, long scratching again coming from my ceiling where the attic was. And I just thought to myself, not again. I pulled the blankets up to my nose as if there was some magical blanket that would make me invisible, when the scratching stopped abruptly. And for some reason I became even more scared, even more nervous, and even more paranoid. I could hear my brother softly snoring in the next room, as he does when he enters REM sleep. I took some comfort in that, but then I hear a jiggle on my door handle, the sound of someone placing their hand on it, and I look towards the door. And my door slowly opens ajar, and the wider it becomes, the more moonlight I can see from my brother's windows. The door was completely open now, and what I saw in the doorway, standing there, completely silent and unmoving, was the silhouette of a very skinny, hunched woman, completely still and completely quiet. And what I remember the most was her hair, because it was sticking up at all ends and directions, completely and utterly crazy looking, like what you'd think a mental patient would look like after shock therapy or something. I began to whimper, fearing for my soul, saying the Lord's Prayer in my head over and over. She, or it, stood silently there for what seemed like an eternity, probably more like 10 seconds, though. But because of the angle of the moonlight, I couldn't see any of the features other than a very disturbing smile, and I will never forget that smile as long as I live. I was about to scream for my brother, who was comfortably snoring in the next room, when she put her nails on the door and proceeded to slowly drag them downwards, creating a noise worse than nails on a chalkboard. And it was at this point that I knew that I had found the source of the scratching. I pulled my covers over my head and began to cry, and I screamed, "Leave me alone," and then immediately jumped out of the bed to confront it, but when I did, it was gone. I hurried into my brother's room, which was literally a step away from my closet, to determine if he was playing a joke on me. And I saw no evidence of him being the culprit. He was sound asleep, still softly snoring and dead to the world, curled up 3 times in a blanket-made burrito. I obviously woke him up to tell him about what just happened. All I got from him, though, was a "go the hell back to bed and let me sleep." And nevertheless, I just slept with the lights on that night. Now, I know some of you might say that it was just a dream or you experienced sleep paralysis, but I say no to that. I've had sleep paralysis incidences, and although it too was extremely terrifying, it was absolutely nothing like this. I never found out who or what that thing was. The internet wasn't anything compared to what it's like now, and in all honesty, I just wanted to forget it all ever happened anyway. If I could remember the address, I would most definitely try to dig into it more now that I'm older and I have a better grasp on myself now. Plus, the paranormal is a very interesting thing to me now. But I still get those feelings to this day, even now. The older I've gotten too, the more I kind of understand it. But that memory will forever be branded into the mushy goo that is my brain. I will forever be haunted by the memory of that woman or thing. So, me and my partner moved into this old house. We live with the landlord and his family, but in our own studio flat with a bathroom down the hall. It was nice at first, but then things just started getting odd, and quite honestly, I'm a bit terrified. During Christmas, I remember I came home from work as I was ill. I arrived back at 3:30, and my partner was still up at this point, and all the cupboards were open. I asked him why did he do that, and he said that he didn't. He was playing League of Legends on Ranked, but once he's on, he never gets off for hours, so I actually believed him. I kind of passed the whole thing off though, so I just closed them all and I laid in bed. My boyfriend went to go out to the bathroom, and when he came back, he questioned why I opened all the cabinets. See, I was on my phone the entire time though, and these cabinets are silent, so you can't hear them when you open them. The Christmas tree lights had just turned off, and we spent the rest of the night just kind of sitting there whimpering. This all continued, and we just did our best to ignore it, trying not to think much of it. But a few weeks after this, things started getting dropped on me and my partner's face when we were asleep. There would be shoes, bottles, random heavy objects. It was more annoying than scary, and a month goes by and it's quiet again. My boyfriend's mum, Polish woman, very Catholic, suggested that we go to a church and seek help there. I disagreed to it because I didn't think it was a demon or anything, and they wouldn't help us anyway. Random objects were thrown at my partner though, and he would start blaming me for it. Arguments got frequent, and so did the activities. Now, my partner needed to go back to Poland for a week, so I was alone for some time. I can't sleep at night alone for personal reasons, so I slept during the day and was active at night. 2 days after my boyfriend left, 3 to 4 a.m., someone would knock on our door, and there would be someone walking in circles upstairs for hours too. It sounded like they had shoes on with some sort of rubber on it as it squeaked. My partner comes home after the week had gone, and it was about 10 p.m, and I was expecting him to be back at about 12. I was in the bath. I'd like to mention too that the bathroom was now an ensuite rather than down the hall, and I submerged myself under the water. And it was at this point that I felt someone's hand pull my hair, and I panicked, got out of the bath and screamed at my boyfriend for scaring me like that. But he wasn't home. He was stuck in the airport due to the lines still. And honestly, I felt my heart drop to my stomach as I didn't immediately think ghost, and I heard our door open and shut, which is why I assumed it was my boyfriend. I went around the house and checked the wardrobe and outside my door and everywhere, but there was no one around. I asked the landlord to check CCTV, and all we saw was the door open and shut. No one came in and no one left except me when I was checking. A few nights ago too, our bathroom door opened slowly and then slammed. I tried to ignore it, but then I heard a thump and turned around to my boyfriend upset as he was awoken to a paperweight being chucked at him. He had a huge bruise on his forehead too, and he knew that it wasn't me as he woke up instantly and I was facing the opposite direction. Which leads me to my question, what is happening to us? Why is this thing just so aggressive? I'm scared, and I know feeding fear to this thing is the worst thing you can do, but how am I not to be scared? I mean, what's happening is terrifying. I'm not a firm believer in the paranormal by any means, but I do think that there's something out there, and I'm open to discussion because there are a few things that I've experienced that I just can't explain logically, and this is one of them. I don't remember most of my childhood very well, but this memory is as clear as day. I was 8 years old and it was summer break. I wasn't really social, so I spent most of my out-of-school time playing games. I was playing Bone, out from Boneville. In retrospect, not that good of a game, but I absolutely loved it. I played it dozens of times, even though there was nothing really new to discover. When my mum came home from work, she looked pretty serious and told me that my grandfather, from my dad's side, had unfortunately died. I was devastated and cried a lot. Although I didn't live with my father, my grandpa was a person that I was really close to. The next day, I played Bone again. As I stated before, I played this game a lot, so it didn't seem weird. And when my mum came home from work, she told me that my grandfather died. Again. I thought she might be stressed from work and had forgotten that she's really told me that, so I told her, "Yeah, I know, you said that yesterday." But she said that was impossible because she only learned about it today. Needless to say, I was pretty freaked out by this. So I was a maintenance worker at a camping resort in the Appalachian Mountains for several years. It was more like a rich glamping resort with luxury cabins that had been renovated. But the place still had an old and rustic feel to it. It was miles from civilization too, and was super peaceful, especially during the down season. The resort was originally built during the Roaring Twenties at the height of Prohibition. The Appalachian Mountains are infamous for moonshining operations, and I'm pretty sure that this resort was the center of it all back in the day. There's a locked safe room hidden underground where they used to store shine, as well as secret passages underneath some of the old cabins that were also used to store the illegal liquor. In its heyday, the resort was visited by numerous numbers of high society that came to the party with the forbidden spirits hidden underneath the resort. One night towards the end of spring, before our busy season began, I was starting to become close with the new tourist manager of the resort. Her name was Kate, and that night she wanted us to sleep outside under the stars, but it started raining. I suggested that we go sleep in the screened-in porch of one of the old cabins that hadn't been renovated yet. I thought that it would be a pretty good compromise, and we could fall asleep to the sound of the rain falling. Hey, who says romance is dead, right? After we got everything set up and did the old in and out, it was sometime past 2 a.m. She fell asleep in my arms instantly, and I laid there just kind of unable to fall asleep. I was worried that I was going to disturb her because I usually toss and turn when I have a hard time going to sleep. I figured that we'd been laying there for over an hour at this point when I heard what sounded like a door inside the empty cabin open and close. It was either the bedroom or the bathroom. Both of the old doors squeaked really loud and struggled to open and shut. I knew that they had been oiled or replaced when we renovated that cabin though, so it was weird. Honestly though, my first thought was that it was our boss, the resort owner's son. He's super nosy and has been trying to get into this girl's pants ever since he hired her. He's also very demanding and entitled. I wouldn't put it past him to fire me if he knew the two of us were seeing each other. Yet, I don't know why he would be sneaking around the resort at night, or how he would know that we were even there. It was a good-sized resort after all. I proceeded to hear footsteps coming from inside the cabin towards the door to the screened-in porch. I laid there as still as I could, waiting for the door to open and have my boss lose his short temper when he discovered us. I prayed that he would just walk away and not find us, but nothing happened. Now, there were no receding footsteps and no more door noises. I stayed up the whole night too and didn't hear another noise come from the cabin. And there was nothing there except for me, Kate, and the empty cabin. The next morning too, Kate rolled over and immediately asked me about the footsteps she heard the night before. Apparently they had woken her up, and she also stayed up all night trying to figure out where they were coming from and who they belonged to. She too was terrified and, in fact, would never go near that cabin again. Unfortunately, I had to go back to that cabin nightly. Part of my job was having to make sure all the lights were off and everything was shut down in the empty cabins at night. Well, my boss liked to turn on the lights to the empty cabins to give the appearance like the resort had more guests than it really did. And every night that I went into the cabin after that, I always felt a sense of dread as I walked towards that cabin. I think it's because I just never figured out what was in that cabin that night. But that cabin was never renovated during the 4 years I worked at the resort. There was always some excuse that the project manager had for delaying the renovation of that cabin. I didn't mind, but I did hate to go to that cabin at night. Inside the living room of the cabin, there was also a huge 175-pound swinging bed on chains that could be lifted up or down to make space for my guests staying in that cabin back in the day. Every night that I went to that cabin after we heard the footsteps, I would always open the door of the cabin and find that bed swinging on its own like someone or something had just gotten out of the bed before I got there. G'day mates, it's Busta here. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and if you would like to help me out, then please go ahead and watch another video by clicking on a card on the screen. As always guys, thanks for all the love and support, and I'll see you mates in the next one.